Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, all good. All good. You?
Yeah, Tiago, thank you very much. All good here, all good here. Can't wait to get started today.
Another busy week in Bitcoin.
It has been, hasn't it?
So, what are we going to kick off with today, then, Sid?
Well, I just thought we'll talk about what's been happening in the last 7 odd days since our last podcast and see what the Bitcoin world's been up to.
Yeah, yeah.
And the first one, I thought we could talk about the Do Kwon incident. I don't know if you've been reading up on that.
Which one? Where do
Yeah,
we
quite.
begin?
Yeah. So apparently, there's been Do Kwon's transferred more than 10,000 Bitcoin out of platform accounts after its collapse.
Yeah, and it looks like this is the SEC, I think, isn't it? Which is, for one, seems to have done a fairly comprehensive investigation into what's going on. So that's a well done, SEC. Very impressive.
Yes,
Um, so
it
they
was the
seem
SEC.
to
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they seem to have determined that they've taken 10,000 Bitcoin and they're on a periodic basis, they're transferring them to an unnamed Swiss institution, a Swiss bank, and they're converting it into cash. And they're alleging that so far they've withdrawn more than $100 million.
Wow, like who would have thought, right? You thought he was absolutely a golden boy, wasn't he, Do Kwon? I mean, for those who don't know, Do Kwon was a South Korean co-founder and CEO of this firm called was it Terraform Labs, I think,
Yeah, I think so.
and the parent company, which was of the stablecoin Terra USD and cryptocurrency Luna, and they both collapsed in 2022, wiping off 45 billion in capitalization in 1 week, causing hundreds of billions losses. And he now faces obviously legal pressure. He's not been charged. He hadn't been charged yet, but people weren't sure what had happened. So this SEC's investigation really, really shows that he was in definitely something fishy was going on. But we knew
Yes.
that, but obviously nobody had put a finger on it.
Yeah, I mean, so it was an algorithmic stablecoin, which just means that rather than people doing market operations to maintain the peg at one United States dollar, they were using an algorithm to do it. So it was meant to be completely hands off. And part of the way they were guarding the peg was they created something called the Luna Foundation Guard. And for this, so they bought a whole bunch of Bitcoin and stuck it in there. And the idea was they'd be able to defend the peg with this Bitcoin. And so that's where the Bitcoin has been siphoned from. So yeah, 10,000 Bitcoin is a tiny little sum.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the fact that he was allowed to transfer it out of the custodial accounts into his own wallets or whatever off wallets from the company, and then just be able to cash them out as well. It's quite spectacular.
Yeah. But as interesting as that is, I think there's even bigger news, which was it looks like so. There's a firm called Jump Crypto. Now, back in May 2021, they started losing the peg on the USD with Terra, and the peg eventually recovered. And Do Kwon came out and he said that this is proof that the system works. Right? It was a really difficult time. The algorithm kicked in. They defended the peg, and look what an amazing ecosystem that he has created. We now know that that was bullshit.
Hmm.
What actually happened was that there's a Chicago-based firm called Jump Crypto that came in and bought, I think, somewhere in the region of $60 million worth of Terra in order to prop up the price to get it back up. And now, from that date
Interesting.
forward, it was basically a complete scam,
Yeah,
right? Because they
yeah,
knew it had failed. And yet
yeah,
he's going out there telling everybody what an amazing system it is.
yeah.
And
Pretending it works.
interestingly,
Yeah.
yeah, and Jump Crypto has been quite involved in that whole ecosystem, apparently. And it turns out they were buying Terra at huge discounts. I mean, there was one point they bought it at 40 cents a token when it was trading for $90. on the open market, right? So for their 60 million investment, they ended up making 1.28 billion dollars.
Did they sell them?
So when Terra was collapsing, there was some shady shenanigans going on, and the small guys weren't allowed to take their money out, and yet big players were cashing out, weren't they? So
Yes.
yeah, so they cashed out and they took their 1.28 billion dollars with them, and left the retail to bag it up.
Yeah.
But again, this wasn't, a lot of people were hailing him as a hero and all this, and again you've got guys like Corey that were coming in, weren't they, and saying this is rotten, this stinks to high hell.
Yeah. I know, mate. It's just there are certain people who came out of nowhere, became super big, including Sam Bankman-Fried, and who didn't exist. I mean, he didn't even exist in 2017, 2018. Never heard of him. And then overnight, he was the biggest kahuna on the block, saving companies like BlockFi and any other company that needed saving with money that God knows where it came from. And that too was quite suspicious to me. I mean, and I think Preston talks about it on his latest podcast. If you haven't heard it, please go listen to that one. And it's just insane how somebody like him came out of nowhere, rose to the top of the pyramid, and was interviewing and being sort of hobnobbing with the top people in politics and sports and what have you.
Well, particularly as, it's come out since the collapse. I mean, it's quite obvious now that they're just not the geniuses that we were all told that they were, right? These guys are, they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
How he created what he created in FTX, a nationwide known brand, with billions of dollars in, what was it, 2 years? I mean, I don't know, but it's an incredible story, right? It seems fishy.
Yeah, I mean, there's guys. I think Preston mentions it in his podcast. It's like there's got to have been somebody backing him up. There has to have been more to it than meets the eye. Because look, I've met some very, very clever 20-year-olds, very clever ones. But to have a 20-year-old like him, and you listen to him talk, and you realize that this guy is not coming from a position of high IQ. I'm sorry. I mean, he's not figured out the answer to all financial problems and created this company, which is just super amazing. All he's done is he's just been used either as a tool or he's worked in cahoots, but there's somebody else backing him up. There's more to this than meets the eye.
I agree. So what do you think of the latest crackdowns we're seeing now from the SEC on stablecoins, now that they've finally woken up? What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It almost seems, yes, obviously they had to be seen to be doing something after the FTX collapse. And a normal person would probably say, yeah, it's obviously expected. Companies were taking advantage of normal, innocent retail public, and the regulators needed to step in. And it's funny because I remember somebody telling me once, isn't it funny how we always put our faith, at least in capitalism, we put our faith in institutions to protect us that have let us down over and over again. And we don't trust capitalism in its core form, where actually the companies who don't perform well should really go under. The ones who cheat you should go under. But you end up running towards the regulators. And I think Jesse Powell had a really good take on this a few days ago. And he said, I've got a theory. And it reads, regulators let the bad guys get big and blow up because it serves their agenda. To 1, destroy the capital resources in the crypto ecosystem. 2, burn people, deter adoption. 3, give air cover to attack good actors. And the bad guys are actually on side, whereas the good guys are the enemy. It does make you think. I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried is still sitting at home, isn't he?
Well, and what gives this, gives it some legs are the fact that both Jess Powell, who at the time was the CEO of Kraken, and we have the CEO of Custodia, Caitlin Long, both apparently warned regulators about these what looked like at the time scams, and they were completely ignored. So you kind of got to wonder why they were ignored. And then afterwards, they were the ones that were punished, right? So
Yeah, funny that, yeah.
yeah, Kraken have just taken, I think it was a $30 million fine because the SEC is going after them for staking. And Custodia have been denied access to a master Fed account.
Yeah.
So that's, it's odd, isn't it?
It definitely doesn't smell kosher, does it? I mean, there's something more to it than meets the eye, and I think it just smells foul. And that's the hard bit, because you stop trusting the authorities for that reason. Because when you start looking at this and think, hang on a second, it's becoming blatantly obvious that you're going after the wrong people. Anybody who's been involved in this space sort of has a good eye and a good nose to smell and see who the honest players were and who were the scammers. But to see the honest players being punished and the scammers still chilling and enjoying and having run away with millions and millions worth, or billions sometimes even, worth of people's savings, and they're nowhere to be seen or caught. It's just staggering.
Yeah.
Or even being helped to sort of move from sort of jurisdictions like Bermuda into the US, like SBF has been, and then given a bail of, I don't know how many $100 million was his bail. And
250 million, I think.
was it? And it was his father and his one of his father's colleagues putting their house as insurance.
Collateral, yeah.
Must have houses on Malibu, like 10, 15 houses on Malibu, to put even a percentage of that bail up front.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. And the other thing that I find interesting is they're going after stablecoins, saying they're illegal securities. But, of all the shit coins out there, stablecoins are the least security-like asset. I mean, why aren't they going after Ethereum or, any of the others?
Yeah, which is interesting, because I think as on Preston's podcast, Preston said, right, he has a theory that they actually need stable coins to keep the US dollar pegged to something which is going to be used more, and that increases the usability of US dollar.
Well, I think he's right. I mean, why would they start from scratch with the CBDC in the United States when they've got all these stable coins? I mean, this is putting the dollar in the hands of everybody all around the world. And how are they creating those stable coins? They're creating them by buying treasuries at a time when nobody else in the world is buying treasuries. So I think they'd be mad to create headwinds for stable coins. So it makes you wonder, look, I'm not a clever guy. If I figured that out, I'm sure they figured that out. So then what is their play here, right?
Right. And as he said, I mean, there's a good possibility that they're going to basically bail these stable coins out later on with some investment bank which is going to create its own currency, but they don't want to do the hard work of actually creating the currency. And they'll just say, yeah, fine, we'll bail you out, as Preston said in his podcast, but we'll take over your interests and we'll take over the control. And you become a JP Morgan coin or a Bank of America Merrill Lynch coin.
Yeah, and rather than creating a Fed coin, if they were to embrace the stablecoin industry, that would put them 5-10 years ahead of anybody else with their CBDCs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they will do it, but I just think how they'll get there, but they'll fully destroy the public's faith in stable coins, as Jesse Powell said. It'll make people detest the system, private system, and they'll say, don't worry, we've regulated it. Now it's safe to step out and you can now buy these stable coins and everything's going to be fine. It's going to be run by big banks and they're going to be given an option, not an option, but under the table they'll be told to buy treasuries. And US suddenly has a buyer for treasuries. And everybody around the world is funding it by buying the stable coins.
Yeah, I know it kind of verges into tinfoil hat territory, but you just look at what's going on and you just have to think it just can't be, what it looks like at face value. It's so ridiculous. I just can't believe that there's not some sort of ulterior plan they've got going on here.
Well, as another take, another slightly different take was by Balaji, and he basically answered Jesse Powell's tweet with his own, which was like, after failing to prevent the financial crisis or the dot-com crash, was the SEC disbanded? And that's a really good point. And he says, no, their budget was increased. It's flat during good times and rises in crisis. More failure equals more funding, right? And then he says, goes on to say, US regulators are just as corrupt as military-industrial complex. The SEC hungers for financial crisis like Raytheon hungers for wars. That's their meal ticket. That's when careers are made. Moreover, even when something isn't a crisis, they'll make it out to be one.
Yeah.
So people have some interesting takes on it.
It's a sad
And
state
these are
of affairs,
intelligent people.
but it's hard to argue with that logic. I mean, they've just proven so on the face of it incompetent over the past few years that you just have to wonder: is it incompetence or do they know what they're doing? And the other thing is that the Terra debacle is now just black and white a fraud, right? So that's going to be a super easy case for them. So you just wonder if this isn't a bit of territory grab for the SEC as well. They're throwing all this into it. And then, of course, once they win, which they will, rightly, then that becomes precedent in law, doesn't it, for all the other stable coins. So,
yeah, and precedent is hugely important, hugely important. Once you've got it, then you can use that for further cases and what have you.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, true. Okay, so that's reaffirming our faith in the system. So
That's all a bit depressing, isn't it, Sid?
Actually, just on that note, what do you think about the statement by Christia? I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Christia Freeland. She talks about the Canada's Emergencies Act inquiry. Did you listen to her clip?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I mean, it's just more dystopian nightmare coming out of Canada, isn't it? So, for those that weren't following too closely, when the truckers were protesting last year against, was it last year or the year before? Time flies at the moment.
Yeah, it does actually.
I think it was beginning of last year, maybe. Anyway, when the truckers were protesting in Ottawa, which by the way was a completely legal protest, the Canadian government decided to start seizing funds. And so they just froze people's bank accounts. Anybody they could find that was associated with the protest, lawful protest, had their funds frozen, which is incredible in a Western democracy. So Christie is out at the moment making a speech. One of the Canadian judges has ruled on this, and they've come to the conclusion that freezing bank accounts was a powerful tool to discourage participation and to incentivize protesters to leave. Which, no surprise there. They love it. All government violence basically is valid. And so it's just surprising that we're seeing this in Canada. And I think people need to be on their guard and, we need to start standing up to this stuff. Nobody's standing up. I don't know where we're going with it.
But it's funny, isn't it? She said that, it was proven that it was an effective tool to prevent violence. I mean, why is that even being considered? And it's nice how they've put it, just so people realize that the other option was we would have gone violent with you.
Yeah, with peaceful protesters.
Yeah, and the fact that now they've said, it's been accepted as a powerful tool, suddenly you're looking at precedents again. So they say, well, actually, that's easy. So if you need to do it again, guess what's coming for you? If you decide to protest about, I don't know, tomorrow what the protest is going to be about.
When they declare that cow farts are what's giving all the pollution in the world, and that the Canadians are no longer allowed to eat beef anymore, you start protesting against that. Oh, I'm sorry, your bank account's frozen. Dictators love financial censorship, and just to tie this into CBDCs again, that just makes this even tighter. The control goes down to the level of every individual transaction. And people might think this is like a completely crazy dystopian future, but that is what this technology enables. And I think at the very minimum, we need to have a very frank conversation about that now before it's in, because once it's in, it's too late. We ain't getting rid of it.
True. And I just, the fact, as you rightly said, that Canada is the first country to have used this so effectively is scary. If it was, I don't know, country under dictatorship, you'd sort of expect it. I mean, they tried it in Nigeria, which is not a dictatorship, by the way, but just the fact that they used shut down control of how much money could be taken out of ATMs and how much money you could withdraw every month to introduce e-Naira. So financial control is becoming more and more prevalent, I think, and that's something to watch out for.
It is. I mean, like we discussed last week, we saw it in Nigeria where, one politician decided that everybody's banknotes were worthless. And now all of a sudden, nobody's got any money anymore. That's why we Bitcoin.
That's it. That's absolutely right. Yeah. No, true. Space to watch and be observe very carefully because things are changing very quickly and can't be ignored. Somebody has to, not somebody, all of us have to sort of keep that in mind and resist it now whilst we can.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, the other story moving swiftly on is just very quickly, you've had two big miners merge in Bitcoin mining. That's Hut 8 and US Bitcoin. So they're both struggling. All the miners have been struggling recently, as you probably are aware. And that's just because when the boom in mining was taking place and the difficulty was low, they all rushed in to buy as many miners as they could. And they couldn't buy it with the cash they had, so they took on lots and lots of leverage. And the way they did it was by using their miners. I mean, we had that option with as well, didn't we? You could use miners as collateral.
We got offered that, didn't we? It was this new innovative product of was it last year or the year before?
Yeah, and it was a slam dunk apparently, which you basically said your mine is worth X. You take leverage against it, using it as collateral, and you buy more miners. What could possibly go wrong? And that's exactly what all these mining companies, at least most of them, did.
Yeah, I mean, when you say what could possibly go wrong, I guess the electricity price could go up, the hash rate could explode, and the Bitcoin price could lose 70%.
Yeah.
Other than that, not much though. Other than that, it's pretty safe.
And it doesn't help that the miner's price is dictated by the price of Bitcoin.
No, so mining machines that were going for 10 grand a couple of years ago, you're struggling to sell for $1,500, aren't you today?
Yeah, and especially if you're levered against it at $10,000.
Don't ask me how I know that, by the way.
Yeah, have you been selling some then at a profit?
No, I wish.
Yeah, can't get them off your hands at the moment. So it's quite interesting to see that a lot of these companies were really, really hurting. And I think a couple of them have been delisted from, or they've been threatened to be delisted because they just didn't even make the minimum valuation target that you have to be to be listed. So there's a merger going on, which is good, I guess, for making it a little bit more sustainable in terms of lasting power. But equally, there's the flip side, which is like, should hash power get centralized with some few big actors? That's something to be worried about.
Yeah, I think there's a valid conversation to be had about the centralization of mining. And I think we covered it in a previous episode, but it's important not to take a mining pool as a single entity. You've got to look at the individual mining groups in that pool. But having said that, I do think there's an overwhelming majority of the hash rate today in Bitcoin is done by, I think, about four entities. So it's definitely something I think that we need to keep on the radar going forward.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So that's one news. The other news, which is...
tangentially, sorry, Sid, just before we move on. I did see, there was a tweet put out by a guy the other day I thought was bloody brilliant. He's taken two miners, stuck them in his loft, and he's got the exhaust exiting into vents, which go into his air conditioning system in the house. And he's heated his whole house all winter using two mining machines.
Do you know what? That is more and more becoming common, stories like that. There are people heating their swimming pools with it. There are people heating their homes with it. There are people creating greenhouses with it. It's
Dude,
just insane.
I'm telling you, it got me thinking. And, especially at the prices today, right? You spend $1,000, pick up a modern machine. run a couple of those. And I was thinking, well, my house is already ducted for aircon. I wonder if I can stick a couple of miners in the loft and just 24/7 bit of Bitcoin coming in.
My friend actually was building his house recently, about a year ago, and he was interested in Bitcoin. And he asked me this question. At the time, I didn't even think about it. And he was saying, can I put a Bitcoin miner in my house and use that for heating? And I sort of didn't know much about it at the time, but I think it would have been a bloody brilliant idea.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I just thought, I'll file that away for the future. You never know.
Yeah, no, quite. I think there's going to be, people are going to come up with some crazy uses for this. It's definitely, the game's not over yet.
No. So, shock horror then, Sid. I think our next story would suggest Bitcoin isn't boiling the oceans. Tell us about it. What we got going on here?
Oh, yeah. So, you know the same story we saw, which was from the University of Cambridge data that was used to demonize Bitcoin and its energy use and dirty energy, is sort of come up with the new stats, haven't they?
Apparently so. Tell us all about it.
So now apparently Bitcoin uses more than half its energy is coming from sustainable sources. So, which we talked about, didn't we, about in the FUD episode, that a lot of the energy has to be off-grid pretty much to make Bitcoin mining sort of viable.
That's got to make Bitcoin mining one of the most sustainable industries. I mean, I don't know the figures, but I can't imagine there are many industries above 50% sustainable, are there?
No, and it's also had the quickest change from non-sustainable to sustainable energy of any industry, I think. There was some tweet I read the other day, so it must be true.
Funny that, isn't it? You know, It's almost as if the economics incentivize miners to use cheap, sustainable energy.
Yeah. Funny. No, funny that, totally.
I didn't read that in the New York Times.
Yeah. And I think that this is where people don't appreciate the geographical limitation of Bitcoin mining. And equally, the ability to decentralize the location, because you're limited by where the energy is, but you're not limited by the country that you have to be in. You could have Bitcoin mining in any country where there is a remote energy that's not being utilized effectively, and you could create Bitcoin down there.
Stranded, yeah. So
Stranded,
I mean, we were talking about hydro dams. I think you can transport electricity about 500 miles, I believe, before it starts. The economics just don't work anymore due to transmission loss. So, unfortunately, a lot of places where hydro dams make sense are not anywhere near population centers. And particularly we saw that in China with the central planning of the government there in Beijing. And they're creating they created all these hydro dams in the middle of nowhere. And hence why one of the reasons the mining got so big in China was just all this energy available that nobody was using.
Yep. Yeah, true. No, absolutely. So, so it's sustainable. And I wonder if that'll change Elon Musk's take on accepting Bitcoin.
Interesting. Why would you say that?
Well, he tweeted, didn't he, a while ago, that if it crosses, they stopped using, Tesla initially announced that they bought Bitcoin and they would be accepting Bitcoin. And that became a big deal. And then a few months later, they said, we're not going to take Bitcoin anymore because of the kind of energy it uses. And he said, if it crosses 50% of sustainable energy, Tesla will resume accepting Bitcoin. So, yeah, here we are.
Watch this space.
Indeed.
He's just introduced. Did you notice this? I think it came out yesterday or today. He's brought in some fake fucking coins for Twitter. Have you seen this? And you can get coins. Yeah, mate. People are just ripping the piss on Nostr.
Really?
Oh, mate, it's horrendous. So you can buy coins on Twitter, and I don't know what the rate is, but let's say you get like 100 coins for $3.50 or something, and then you can send people who has a tweet that you like these fake coins, and then if you get something like 50 coins, they transform into a diamond. Meanwhile, on Nostr, you've got people zapping lightning.
I know.
It's just like, oh my God, Elon, what are you doing? This Twitter thing is so antiquated and you don't know it. You've just spent $40 billion on this thing. And it's like watching something from 1980. Nostr has just made it obsolete overnight. The only thing
mate, honestly, I don't think so. I can't imagine how good the Nostr has, how good they've managed to make it the first time round. I mean,
Incredible, isn't it?
it is. It is fantastic. You would have expected it many takes and many iterations to have come this far.
So I know, Bitcoiners to Nostr is like a duck to water, right? It just fits in perfectly with the Bitcoiner way of thinking. What will be interesting for me, and where my jury is slightly out still, is how quickly the general population will come across. What if their local celebrities aren't on it, or I don't know. That'll be interesting to follow. But I have a hunch that it's going to go quickly, because once you've experienced the freedom on there, you realize that you're almost self-censoring on Twitter the whole time, right? Because you're afraid that you're going to be pulled for whatever reason, whether it be COVID jabs, there we go, now we can't put this on YouTube, or whatever the topic du jour is. Whereas on Nostr, it's just such a sense of freedom. It's brilliant.
It is, but equally, you wonder how many people are searching for the freedom. That's the other thing. I think the Bitcoiners, by definition, it's in their DNA.
Well, agreed. And that's why it's going to be interesting to follow. And the other thing, again, we've touched on this before, but this whole integration of Lightning into Nostr is incredible. And, people are talking, you've got likes on Twitter, but likes are meaningless, right? You're not involved in a like. When you send somebody Lightning, it's created out of proof of work. That's a finite resource that you're giving to somebody else. So that's real signal in a world of noise. So yep. I think it's just going to obsolete likes. And also, I don't know about you, but I was just playing around. We've got a mutual, one of our friends is on there, and we were sending each other zaps today. It's just, until you've actually experienced it, and you're not asking for anybody's bank account, you're just like, oh yeah, hey, I'll just send you, 20 sats or whatever. And it just works instantly. It's brilliant. It's going to be revolutionary.
Yeah, I think it's going to give people sort of a quick lesson in sort of cost-free payments over Lightning as well. That's going to be interesting. Everybody who uses Nostr will suddenly understand Lightning very quickly, or at least experience it very quickly.
Yeah, it's a Trojan horse for Lightning and Bitcoin, because anybody on Nostr is going to probably want to get a Lightning wallet, as they're free, and you can then start zapping people, or people can zap you. So that's it's a super interesting development. It just feels like things are really accelerating in the background at the moment in the past year in all this kind of stuff. One of the other things that I think is going to really integrate well with Nostr is Bolt 12. So bolts in the Lightning Network. Yeah, so Bolt stands for Basis of Lightning Technology, and that's the equivalent of the BIP in the Bitcoin world. BIP stands for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. So anybody can come up with a BIP or a Bolt. So let's say you've got a great idea to make Bitcoin or Lightning better. You're going to write a Bolt or a BIP, and then it'll get discussed in the community. And if everybody thinks this is a great idea, this is going to revolutionize Lightning, then it gets coded out and then implemented into the live protocol. So what Bolt 12 deals with is offers invoicing. So at the moment we use Bolt 11. The problem with Bolt 11 is this. So if I want to send you, Sid, 1,000 sats on Lightning, I can't just send you 1,000 sats. First of all, you've got to create an invoice for 1,000 sats, send it to me, and then I can pay that invoice. Now, what Bolt 12 does is it creates something they call them offers, and their offers are useful because they're persistent and they're static. So instead of having to create an invoice every time somebody wants to give you money, you can just create an offer under Bolt 12. So you could imagine this being used, say, on billboards for donations, like on Nostr, maybe Patreon accounts. Because one of the other really neat things that comes in with Bolt 12 is that you can create recurring subscriptions, which is one of the big limitations of Lightning so far, because a lot of services rely on subscriptions, because and creators really like subscriptions because they're sticky, right? Sometimes you forget, you think, oh, I must stop that subscription, but it takes you months to do. So subscriptions are really, really critical in that kind of world. And what Bolt 12 allows you to do is to create recurring subscriptions for the first time. But here's their clever trick: they can be denominated in sats or fiat. So you can say, okay, you can subscribe to my newsletter for $10 a month. And that $10 a month, you can just pay over Lightning using Lightning, so it's settled in Sats. So that's really clever. So I think once you integrate that into Nostr, I think that's really going to take it to the next level.
And I think it's not just going to be Nostr then. Once that is implemented, there's going to be, I think, likes of Substacks and Medium and all these other platforms where people publish their own little essays or findings and blog posts. They can implement Bolt there as well. I won't be long before the other sort of mediums start using it as well.
Yeah, agreed. Or you could just use Twitter and pay $3.50 for your coins and then transfer them into diamonds.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I think that's better.
Which aren't usable anywhere outside of Twitter. So,
Even
you
better.
take your choice, up to you.
Yeah, quite. No, good. Interesting. We'll watch this space. I'm quite enjoying Nostra, I'll be honest with you. It's just such a breath of fresh air at the moment.
Yeah, and also when you what you're seeing is no longer curated by algorithms, right? So it's funny how different your feed is compared to, say, on Twitter.
I think that's the problem. I'm just getting so fed up of the feed. I mean, the first thing I was using an app called TweetLogix, which was basically siphoning out all ads, all other replies. I was just getting signal from the people I was following. It was much easier. And then obviously Elon Musk in his wisdom has taken the APIs away, access away from all these third parties, which is, I guess, makes sense because he wants the eyeballs on his platform rather than somewhere else so he can sort of make money. But what is done to me as a user who's been spoiled by that is that now you've got tens of ads, replies that don't make sense to your initial sort of tweet. And then you look at the list of your followers, just bots. This is just bots. Nothing real is going on here.
Yeah.
So
No, it's Brave New World. Come join us on Nostr.
I know. Please do. That's much of a muchness. So just finish off on this note by ARK Investment, which they made a prediction. It's quite positive. So they've got three cases. They've got the bear case, they've got the base case, and they've got the bull case. And as a valuation of Bitcoin in year 2030. So they're saying bear case. They're saying about $258,000 per coin, and on the bull case, it goes up to 1.4 million.
I mean, you wonder how long it's taken them to come up with that, right? How many analysts put in how many hours to come up with that? I mean,
know.
A 6-year-old could tell you Bitcoin is probably going to be somewhere between 250 and 1.5. And honestly, it could be totally wrong. Every 6 months, there's some corporation or other comes out with this pie in the sky figure for Bitcoin, and it ranges from like 200 grand to $10 million. And it's just nonsense. Nobody has any idea. I don't pay any attention to this bullshit anymore. It's just absolute made up crap nonsense.
And I think that's one thing you do realize once you've been in the space. People come up with amazing charts and formula which they think will work, and models that'll prove that the Bitcoin will get to that place. But I'll tell you from personal experience, don't bother.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, it's just, especially at the moment, I mean, everything you look at in the world is just so unstable at the moment. The idea of forecasting in 2030 what the hell's the dollar going to be doing in 2030, let alone Bitcoin, right? I mean, I have no idea what the dollar is going to be doing in 3 years from now.
Yeah, and what the world's going to look like in 3 years.
I mean, maybe we're all going to be speaking Chinese by then. I mean, it just winds me up. It's just nonsense.
I think Saylor said it well, didn't he? Once he said, like, you cannot control one day somebody waking up and buying a lot of Bitcoin, a big company, or somebody waking up and selling a lot of Bitcoin. So none of these models work.
No, they don't.
So you can't predict.
Next year the United States decides to back the dollar by Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where is that in their prediction?
Yeah, or a sovereign country decides, no, we need to have some Bitcoin exposure, or they've already got an exposure and they go public with it. I mean, what happens then?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much all we've got. Anything else interesting happened recently?
I'm sure there is, but nothing springing to mind at the moment. So yeah, good place to end it, I think.
Brilliant. Okay, that sounds good. So we'll wind up here, and we'll be back again next week.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And please give us feedback on how we can improve this show, if there is any. And we hope to listen from you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.